I don't think we need you to have a prolific Twitter presence, all right? Because some, exchange leads have done that and led us down some pretty dark paths. What we need from Dave Ripley is to protect our funds. Welcome to Bankless, where we explore the frontier of internet money and internet finance. This is Ryan Sean Adams. I'm here with David Hoffman, and we're here to help you become more bankless. Kraken versus the SEC. Some context here. Round two. Before we get in, Kraken is one of the two most important exchanges in the US right now. It's also an essential bridge across a bunch of other jurisdictions. Kraken is big in Europe, Australia, Canada, many places across the world. Recently, Kraken has come under fire for the second time from the SEC. That's the second time this year. They settled the first complaint. It's cost them $30 million. But this time, they are fighting the SEC in court. They're saying enough is enough. Kraken versus the SEC in the state of California. It's on. So we brought on CEO Dave Ripley to tell us more. And in the process, it's a good opportunity to get to know him as one of the world's most important centralized exchange operators. David, why was this episode significant to you?
I think it's important that Kraken has to actually fight this time because I think it's pretty clear that the SEC is looking for below the belt wins that they're trying to just scrape out of the crypto industry in whatever way that they can. And so Kraken is choosing to fight very firmly because they realize that if they settle again, then what's to stop Gary Gensler from just trying a third time and a fourth time? Because we know Gary Gensler is not about the facts. He is just here for the narrative. He's just here for the perceived win that he can go to take home and show mom and dad, Janet Yellen and Elizabeth Warren. And so Kraken's got to fight. And so they're taking this heavy responsibility of advocating for the entire industry on their shoulders and fighting Gary Gensler and the SEC. Notably, the big thing that the SEC is charging Kraken is, allowing securities to trade on their platform. But the SEC is going after Kraken, not the United States domiciled issuers of the security, which would be the place that the whole issue is spawned in the first place. They're going after an adjacent service provider. Everything about this is just below the belt. Anyways, this is Dave Ripley's first year as CEO of Kraken, and he's had to deal with this twice now. And so he's just going to take the leadership position for the industry and go to toe-to-toe with Gary Gensler because he has to. And I guess we thank him for it because someone's got to do it, and Kraken's doing this tough job. This would be my analysis of the current predicament and opportunity that Kraken finds itself in.
Before we get into the episode today, first we disclose. So most of you listening to this already know that Kraken is a sponsor of Bankless. It's our recommended exchange. Both David and I tell you that at the beginning of most episodes. And why'd we pick Kraken? Because the world needs a bridge to crypto. And Kraken is one of the few exchanges that served the industry as that bridge without fail for 11 years, many cycles. Furthermore, we want them to absolutely beat the pants off of the SEC. There is a link to all of our disclosures in bankless.com/disclosures. You can always access that.
I learned at the end of this episode, Ryan, that Kraken customers are called Krakenites. So we've got the Bankless Nation, and we also got Krakenites. And we also have Krakenites in the Bankless Nation. Shout out to all of you guys.
All right, guys, we're going to get right to the discussion with Dave Ripley. But before we do, we want to thank the sponsors that made this episode possible, including our recommended exchange for 2023 and 2024. I'm going to say, what's Kraken? It's Kraken. Bankless Nation, we are very excited to introduce you to Dave Ripley. His first time on the podcast. He is the CEO of Kraken. He's been at Kraken for 6 years, but this is his first year as CEO. He's replaced former OG and Bankless guest Jesse Powell, who is the co-founder of Kraken. And Dave has had a very exciting first year or so as CEO because the SEC has come after Kraken not just once, but twice. In Gary's campaign to become maybe the most anti-crypto SEC chairman of all time. Those are our words, not Dave's. But Dave, it is wonderful to have you on Bankless in these trying times. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking with you guys.
Okay, can we start here? We want to get your background and learn a bit more about you. But before we do, let's talk about current events here. So it seems like the SEC dropped some sort of case on Kraken earlier in 2023 around your staking service. And I believe that was resolved in some way. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And now there is a new complaint from the SEC that just dropped, I believe, a month ago, sometime in November. Can you give us some context for all of the regulatory action this year coming out of the SEC towards Kraken?
Yeah, so I mean, I think your summary pretty much covers it on the two events here. One earlier resulted in a settlement, and then this new complaint that just came our way. I mean, it honestly, this new complaint is looks pretty familiar, right? It's it's similar to what we've seen, basically Coinbase face. Frankly, not terribly. I mean, there are differences, of course, given our role in the ecosystem vis-a-vis Ripple, but kind of like the underlying law at play is not terribly different than what they faced with Ripple and in XRP and where they lost. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's obviously disappointing to see. It's particularly disappointing for us and for me to see, kind of the SEC go down this path and kind of, problematic approach that they've had, particularly given that we are in markets in Europe, in the UK, and Canada, and Australia, and many different places where we're working with regulators and they're putting forth clarity, and we are working within those licensing regimes and moving forward, and things are frankly going great in most of those geographies.
Dave, I remember reading some of the details on the weekly roll-up that we do every single week, kind of recapping the news, and the charges of the SEC, as we were reading them, seemed to charge you guys with being an exchange, as in you allowed a marketplace to come together for buyers and sellers of crypto assets. And as you were reading the complaint, you just got the idea that apparently just being an exchange is against the rules, according to the SEC. Is there anything that stood out about the complaint other than just it's the same thing that that Binance does, that Coinbase does, that every other exchange does? Is there really anything that stood out as exceptional in this complaint from the SEC?
Frankly, not for us. No, I mean they try to bake in a number of other things to kind of make the complaint grab headlines. I mean, frankly, it's appears to be and has been for a while a bit of a PR, set of PR objectives, public relations objectives that they have going, with their approach on a number of these different complaints. And so, I think that probably the most notable is, things don't seem to be going that well in the Southern District of New York where they're bringing these claims, right? Of course, XRP didn't go their way. The grayscale request didn't seem to go well. Of course, they didn't see what the outcome they wanted there. Coinbase, that's under progress. It probably takes a room full of lawyers to debate how that's actually progressing, at this given juncture. So, one thing that's different though from all of these is that they're bringing it in a different jurisdiction. So they're bringing it in California as opposed to Southern District of New York, where they.
And that's just because that's where you guys are located in California, right? Kraken is headquartered.
No,
in
it's
the state of
not.
California.
They
okay.
can bring it in a number of different jurisdictions, actually. And it isn't necessarily tied to where we're located. I mean, for what it's worth, we actually don't even have an office in California at this given point in time, and we're not even necessarily located here. Certainly not more so than Coinbase, who they happen to bring into the Southern District in New York district. So, I mean, part of it is, again, speculation, but are they, kind of looking to try a different district that isn't as tied to the one where they've, racked up some of these losses?
So the SEC has collected some L's in New York specifically, and the idea is they are going to go and try out an alternative, perhaps more favorable jurisdiction. At least to try it again.
Yeah.
It's speculation. Yeah, it kind of feels like when I am in middle school or high school, and I ask my mom if I can go out with some friends, and my mom says no, and then I go over to my dad and ask the same question and try and get my dad to say yes. It kind of feels a little bit like that.
This is a very, very reasonable analogy to my more long-winded description, I guess.
Right, and of course, and the interestingly in this complaint, the SEC actually named some of the assets trading on platform to be securities. Atom from Cosmos, Filecoin, Phil from Filecoin, Matic from Polygon, Sol from Solana, Near, a few others, and these are our crypto networks. These are our crypto assets. They are integral to the functioning of these blockchains. They need to be able to be in the market in order for these systems to work. And also, notably, they also trade on Coinbase, which is a public company that the SEC approved to go public. And so this seemed, and again, just reading through some of the documentation from the SEC, they really leaned into a lot of the allusions to other crypto exchanges, which have had much worse stories, FTX being the obvious one. And to me, it appears, again, these are just my opinions, that it's really just a narrative campaign that the SEC is trying to bolster up some allusions to FTX and other exchanges that are not so compliant, which I can imagine as the CEO of a United States domiciled exchange that committed to the United States and has been committed to the United States for 11 and a half years would be supremely frustrating. And as your first year as the CEO of Kraken, I would imagine that would be just like disappointing, to say the least.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're kind of going back to a similar point that I made earlier about, the kind of the element of PR seems to be meaningful here in their approach. I mean, less so, frankly, less so focused on the law. I think when we look at the law and, as we stated in our blog and probably some of our tweets and so forth, there isn't a basis for this complaint here. And so, kind of adding in other things that are, related, unrelated, try to, catch eyeballs seems to be part of this strategy.
Part of the charge here, and maybe some of the PR, was this complaint or this idea that Kraken is co-mingling funds. Can you address that? Like, what was the SEC talking about? And what's your interpretation of this?
This is kind of a typical thing that they've gone to in these complaints. They put in a co-mingling claim in the Coinbase complaint as well. They put one in this particular claim against Kraken. I mean, on a factual basis, by and large, all the facts that they attempt to state aren't correct. Later in the complaint, they attempt to qualify one of their claims earlier with regard to co-mingling. We use, segregated accounts for, operating in custodial funds. And, that's basically the structure of our platform. We, have invested meaningfully in all of these different areas with regard to our systems and our platform, and security is frankly one of the bedrocks for Kraken. That a lot of our clients really appreciate about our platform, and so it just doesn't really have any basis.
Okay, so there was two claims, as I said, two complaints from the SEC this year. The first was actually in February, and Kraken chose to settle that. That was around the staking services that Kraken was providing. Now, this latest one is basically like, you guys are being a crypto exchange, and we're complaining about that because the SEC is alleging that all sorts of these crypto assets are securities. The one in February, Kraken decided to settle. I believe this one in November, Kraken is deciding not to settle. This has been the statement out of Kraken that I've seen on Twitter and your press releases, that you are intending to fight this. You are intending to push this in the court system. Can you tell me why? Is this just like, hey, they've crossed the line here and no further. We're making a stand. This is our core business. Americans deserve access to crypto assets on exchanges that will protect them. Have you guys just said enough is enough? Is that what's happening? And how's this different than February?
Yeah, because a couple of different things. One of the frustrating things about that, settlement is we're not allowed to talk about it or the details of the settlement itself. So that is what it is. I mean, it was certainly different times for the industry and so forth that, back when that happened. But yeah, I mean, all of your description and summary of this particular complaint is precisely how we feel. We feel that, when you look at the law, the SEC is wrong. We intend to prove that and win this case.
Yeah, it's I guess from looking in from the outside, obviously not being part of any of that, it just seems like the SEC won one particular case, got, I believe, $30 million in settlement, and is now coming back 9 months later to recollect There's something that feels like deeply unfair, I think, to most
Yeah.
folks in crypto that are
Yeah.
looking at this from the outside in. I'm sure you can't reflect fully on that, but I think you've got a lot of supporters in the crypto community here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there a couple things. I mean, just with the settlement, there was no admission of any wrongdoing whatsoever as part of that. That's also a piece of it. But yeah, I mean, strange to go through all of that, and they didn't, mention that there might be this other thing about our business that they want to discuss with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite odd, but this is what we face right now in the United States. I mean, all of this is, probably the most amazing part of this is that Congress is working hard trying to actually get a bill across the finish line to bring clarity to answer these questions. And provide a licensing structure, much the same as other countries have done. Canada, Europe, all of Europe underway, European Union, UK is on their way as well. And, the SEC is non-participatory in that process, and just, pursuing this path of litigation, based on, laws from, nearly 100 years ago.
Dave, I'm just curious. Do you have any takes on why? I mean, notably the groups that the SEC is going after, at least on the exchange side, are Kraken and Coinbase, two exchanges that I don't have to remind our listeners were wholly solvent and protected users' funds in the crises of 2022. They were the complete opposite of FTX. And rather than receive kind of praise for that and some I guess greater clarity with respect to your status, it seems like this regulators is going out and now going on the offensive. Where do you think this is coming from? Is this just isolated to the SEC, or as you compare this to other jurisdictions, does this represent some sort of, I don't know, unique undertone of hostility that some in the U.S. government have towards crypto? Like, what's your explanation for this?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a undertone of hostility towards crypto as part of this. I mean, pursuing this path of, regulation by enforcement is clearly that, right? On the companies, there is a notion of, Kraken, Coinbase. These are companies that, been around a long time, have kind of followed this path of regulatory compliance from the outset, continue to work with jurisdictions everywhere. So why these two companies, and why does it seem to it is likely an aspect of that is like the ease with they can do this. It's much more difficult for them to go after a company that is outside the US but still happens to be serving US clients, just from a practical matter. And so I think that's a big part of what we're seeing right now.
So it's just because you're in the neighborhood, they feel like they can.
Yeah,
they're in close proximity.
again,
they can slap you around a bit.
Right. Something that, we get a group of lawyers to explain, but just like the practicality and the process of bringing a complaint against some offshore business is just much more difficult for them to execute from a tactical standpoint. And so, that's obviously one factor here.
So, Dave, you've mentioned that the Kraken has no plans on letting the SEC just bully Kraken around and really the entire industry. And since we're going to go to the course and fight this one, do you have any sort of like clarity as to like what that looks like? Like what is this next? What's the timeline? What's the time frame with regards to the Kraken versus SEC, which is now a case? It's now Kraken versus SEC, correct?
Yep. Yeah, you got it. Gosh, what can I say about this? Yeah, it's a long process. It's an expensive process. This is of course.
Is it more or less expensive than $30 million?
I mean, some of the estimates of the cases that have gone before us were quite significant and extreme. I mean, up there in the 9 figures area, just to fight the case. Which
is that part of the strategy, you think, of the SEC? Is like scare you with the sticker shock of a real fight?
I mean, for sure, there's like the resources must be a factor for any company that has to make such a decision, right? I mean, if the amount of resources necessary just to even embark upon it are significant. So, look, I don't know if that's the, necessarily the estimate for this case, what that would be, but I mean, it's certainly significant amount of, resources necessary to embark upon this type of thing.
Is there any, if we're actually working on passing good legislation that can produce clarity here, say that legislation does get passed that does deem Sol, Filecoin, Polygon to be like not securities, for example, and gives them kind of a regulatory green light or carve out. And would that invalidate this case versus the SEC, or how does that variable work here?
Yeah, you guys got a lot of good legal questions here. So for sure it's a place we want to get to. Like I said, we've been working with a number of members in Congress on this particular bill. We're supportive of it. We want to get there. As a technical matter, I'm not certain that it actually entirely invalidates the complaint that they brought. If there's a new law that's passed, but undoubtedly it's going to be a positive thing for us. If we get to the place where we have that clarity and that law is in place.
Dave, have you guys ever thought about just leaving the US? I mean, please don't, first of all, right? We need functional exchanges that we can trust in the US, and I think US citizens deserve that. But let's be honest, I mean, you're running a business, and it seems like those in power sometimes just don't want you here. They're making it a lot harder. Have you ever given any thought to that?
I mean, it is a business decision, just the same as anything else, just the same as we decide, hey, are we going to enter XYZ new market? I mean, you kind of have to continually evaluate, do we remain in existing markets? One of the fortunate things for Kraken as a company is that we are, quite geo-diversified. Our biggest market is Europe. Kraken was the first place you can buy and sell Bitcoin with euros. And then I think the first place we could buy and sell Bitcoin with British pounds as well, kind of allowed Kraken to grow really strong in those areas for quite some time, being the first mover, really. And today, those are actually Kraken's biggest markets, bigger than the US, if you will. And so, does it lead us to, want to exit the United States? That's not our current position. No, I mean, it's a meaningful market for us. We want to continue to bring our services to clients here. We have a lot of great clients in the United States, and we want to continue down that path. And so it's not something that's, on the table for us right now at all. We are committed to and continuing to serve the United States. I mean, you're right to ask the question, though, as I said at the outset, about these things, they have to make business sense. Otherwise, they're just not sustainable.
So fortunately, Gary Gensler in the SEC he's not boss of the world. In the other jurisdictions, what's your favorite jurisdiction to work in? Is it, does Europe have this right? How's Canada doing? Do they provide more clarity? Are some of the problems that we're seeing in the US, are these kind of US regulators specific problems, or do you see them echoed in other jurisdictions?
Yeah, well, it's probably not true that we can ever say any place is perfect, because these are complex issues and challenges and different perspectives all over the place and so forth. But I would say that, where Europe is heading now with MiCA or MiCAR, their new regulatory structure, where Canada headed, frankly, theirs is a bit more restrictive. They put caps on level of investment in certain tokens, kind of picking winners versus losers. There's some things that are not as positive, but still, even aside from that, the level of clarity has been beneficial, frankly, in both these markets. So I think at least trying to get it right is kind of step one, right? And the reality is we do have a lot of people out there in the US that are trying to get it right. There's all kinds of great people that are, working, both in the industry. Yes, even, some people in Congress that are crypto supporters that are working to try and bring this clarity. It's just, that approach isn't held by all.
Dave, you're a newer face on the scene in the world of crypto. You've been at Kraken for 6 years, but just a CEO for just one of them. And I think I like to speak for the industry when we all kind of like to keep an eye on who are the leaders of our centralized exchanges. You know, these are the places that we deposit trust into, and we typically get to know the CEOs of these respective centralized exchanges. So let's get into a little bit of who's Dave Ripley. Talk to us a little bit about your origin stories and then the arc into becoming the CEO of Kraken.
Yeah, sure. So let me see where to start. So yeah, the path to this current role, I got into crypto in about 2013. And I founded a company, Glidera. That company was acquired by Kraken in 2016. And then I took on the role of COO when I joined Kraken following that acquisition. I held that role for a number of years, 6.5 years, before moving into the CEO role. So long time person in crypto, have all kinds of friends, colleagues, and so forth from, the early days. Not, I guess I'm not haven't been a prolific tweeter in my past. Now X.
I'm envious.
So, social profile isn't significant, but I, certainly have been in the industry for quite some time. And, there's probably all kinds of your listeners that are like, oh yeah, hey, there's Dave. I remember from that one conference in Atlanta where there was only 100 of us there in 2013 and so forth. Yeah. Previous to this, I guess I had kind of like a two-part career previous to moving into crypto. I was an engineer undergrad, worked as a software engineer for a short while, a few years, then a product manager. This was at various technology companies. Lucent Technology is a big one, then CELO, which was acquired by SAP. We were kind of in the enterprise software space, building mobile applications. So early days in mobile, the most prominent device at the time was the Palm Pilot, and the second most prominent was BlackBerry. And so these were, again, early days in mobile, early 2000s. Then business school full-time, Northwestern Kellogg. And then after that, worked for Boston Consulting Group, which is a strategy consulting firm. Worked across a lot of industries, as people do at that company. Financial services being one of them. And so kind of that combination of, financial services and technology leads to fintech being a logical path. But it's not quite the real story. I didn't so much set out to say like, hey, fintech is what I want to do. I more set out to say, hey, Bitcoin, at the time, we didn't really call it crypto. Bitcoin was, what I wanted to do. I learned about Bitcoin, did the proverbial rabbit hole, just the same as you guys probably did, again, back in 2013. The more I learned about it, the more excited I got. And yeah.
What drew you into it, Dave? It's like one thing I'll just comment on is I don't think we need you to have a prolific Twitter presence, all right? Because some exchange leads have done that and led us down some pretty dark paths. What we need from Dave Ripley is to protect our funds and build a fantastic product. So from all that I've observed from you so far is, you're just a fantastic operator, right? And like, there's like, you've been here since 2013. There's kind of like, we call it in crypto, this Lindy effect, of just like, we start to trust things that have been in the industry and survived multiple cycles for a very long time. And that's what I see in Kraken, and that's what I see in you. I'm curious, back in 2013, I mean, you did the consulting track, right? You saw, early tech. You also went to business school. That's an interesting resume for someone to be interested in crypto in 2013. It would have been unorthodox. You had all these like anarcho-capitalist types of, rebels and that sort of thing. And here you are, you're coming from business school in Boston Consulting. You've got that pedigree. What drew you into Bitcoin in 2013? Why that rabbit hole?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I remember you're describing it quite well. I remember being at, again, the conferences that I referenced before, and maybe you get in a conversation, someone asks what you were up to, now or previously or whatever. And I would answer, and most people weren't familiar, with what, what I had done, previously. Is just a little bit different. And then I remember, I met someone, this was again, like 2014. and who was familiar, and we're like, he was like, geez, what are you doing here? And I was like, huh, how about that? What kind of what a question to get at this event. And I mean, the reason is like, look, I mean, it really is the mission of crypto, economic freedom, financial freedom, freedom generally, are things that are, number one on my list for what, what I see are the most critical things for us as humankind to get right. And we haven't always gotten it right, and we frankly have gotten it quite wrong. The bank failures and the financial crisis, the Great Recession of 08, 09, that hit me pretty hard. Frankly, like the injustice of all of that. And so, when I learned about crypto and in Bitcoin, I mean, just so much of it resonated with, frankly, a lot of things that I learned previously. I mean, you do have these like kind of crazy quotes by like a Milton Friedman where he, says, something that doesn't exist today, but will exist in the future, some form of e-cash. And so I think, and others as well. Some of the other economists have similar quotes like that out there. So, anyways, I think it really, frankly, starts and ends there. I mean, there are other aspects as well, which is I've just kind of always liked technology and innovation, and the newness of it, and the growth of and impact of the internet, which frankly is like in some ways a similar mission: freeing of information, freeing of economic ability to transact. There's similarities there.
So Dave, I really like that like class of 2013 and before, right? These are people who I think many of them saw 2008 and were like, a bunch of bankers got a bailout, right? And here's a new monetary system where no one gets bailed out, right? It's like credibly neutral. It's fair from inception. And I think many of that class, those OGs, kind of came from that perspective. One question I have for you is like you are developing Kraken as a platform, not just an exchange, but its entire like crypto asset platform, I would say at this point in time. Mm-hmm. How do you avoid the mistakes that the banks made, right? So how do you make sure that Kraken doesn't become like the banks? And we've seen many exchanges, I would say, a couple of notable exchanges in the last year make these mistakes, right? FTX, yep. What was SBF up to? Well, he was taking depositors' money and doing some unsavory things with it, like typical banker behavior. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've even seen CZ and Binance and, $4.6 billion fine and some issues there as well. What do you plan? What values do you plan to instill in Kraken? What is Kraken here to do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of different things. Like, the values are very much around the crypto ethos for sure. And in our culture, and by the way, there's awesome, we actually articulate this really clearly on our website. If anyone's interested, go check it out. And that is certainly a bedrock of it. But I would also point to kind of our role in the ecosystem and how we see ourselves. I mean, one of our fundamental roles in the ecosystem is we're a bridge. The mission is to drive adoption of cryptocurrency so that, everyone can achieve financial freedom. But, our role in doing so is that of a bridge. And so we're looking to bring people across that bridge and provide them an easy, safe way to get to cryptocurrency. Also, a liquidity pool for individuals to go back and forth. We know these things are going to necessarily coexist as they do today for, some time to come. And so I think that's a big part of it, is that, the mission has us focused and we know our role, and that's kind of the foundational piece of our role, is to be a bridge and, not get sidetracked in a lot of other things.
Ryan, illustrated Kraken as a platform. And so I kind of want to open up that conversation of what is on the roadmap for Kraken and in all of his products offerings. I know there's a rumor of a Kraken layer 2 coming around. I think the last comment that we got from you guys about that was no comment. But like, what can 2024?
But feel free to revise that.
Yeah,
Dave.
but feel free to update that if you are inclined. But overall, like, what can we expect from Kraken in 2024? What are you excited about?
Yeah. So let me see. Quite a few things. Where to start? So we got kind of already set the foundation. Hey, we're this bridge. One of the things we've been like, when we talk about who are actually our clients, one of the areas we've been quite strong historically are with, more like professional individual traders. We've kind of brought the more advanced tools and charting and capabilities and order types and these types of things for those individuals, performant platform. More recently, over the past handful of years, we've moved more into, we call it, consumer, individuals, retail. Some other companies use that term. Building a much more simple experience. And one of the things we want to do is take some of that ethos that we've built with for pro individual traders that allow them the ability to, frankly, find ways to, build and protect wealth. Bring that to consumers, individuals. That means, making sure they have accessible assets to invest in, and the education to go along with it, and ways to navigate the experience and all those different pieces. And then if you go to the other side, institutions is kind of in an area where we have been for quite some time, but not substantially so, and we're certainly building there as well. One of our most prominent products in that space is our benchmark and indices business. It goes by different names, CF Benchmarks. We're the market leader there. So like all of these new ETF applications, the majority of them are powered by Kraken, powered by CF Benchmarks. So, we're kind of directly have an interest in those ETF applications being approved and moving forward from that standpoint. And then
can you go into that a little bit more? Talk about that relationship between CF benchmarks and the ETF applications. Like what's that? Can you just unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these different products, whether it's kind of like the cash traded derivatives, which the CME offer, they require an index, much the same as the ETFs do as well. And so the price of an index is built by, another set of prices, which happen to be the prices on all of or not all, but several major exchanges out there. Kraken being one of them, but also Coinbase and Bitstamp and Paxos and others, right? And so that kind of provides a more robust, stable price that is then used by the ETFs themselves to actually set the price for their for their products.
Okay, it is kind of cool to see when these ETF products come online that it actually is just a bunch of infrastructure built by our industry to serve the ETF products.
It cool. Is right. I mean, the custodians are largely going to be crypto companies. We're launching our custody offering in the coming month. So we're really excited about that. Obviously, Coinbase has had one out there for a while. I mean, Fidelity has a custody offering, but and they're certainly a TradFi company, but they've also been in crypto for quite some time too. So you maybe got to give them a little bit of credit there, just for having been in the space for a while as well.
Yeah, we do, and hopefully it's normalizing things over in TradFi world. I want to ask you about this. So you mentioned custody, of course, Kraken, like other exchanges, but you guys are certainly one of the largest. Has billions of dollars in custody, and just like wrapping your head around that, right? I remember, you guys know those casino heist movies that used to be really popular, like Ocean's 11, Brad Pitt and all those guys, right?
Yeah.
And they would go and they would like do a heist on a casino or something like this, and that there's this pocket of all of this money inside of the casino. Well, that's what kind of exchanges are, right? It's all of these bearer assets that are, you have to secure, and that requires massive specialization. Again, it benefits from Lindy. How do you know if your exchange is secure? Well, how many decades has it been providing secure custody of private keys, right? And also, there's some special things we can do in crypto that other types of vaults in the analog world just can't do, which is like proof of reserves. Do you have any takes on this custody business and how we can kind of move the industry forward? I know Kraken was famously one of the very first exchanges that actually published proof of reserves. So there is some cryptographic guarantee that the assets held in custody were actually in Kraken's custody, and you could verify that on chain. As what's the latest and greatest there? Where would you like to see the industry go, and where's Kraken going with respect to custody and proof of reserves?
Yeah. All of these things, I mean, I like where you started. You started in the right place. I mean, when we talk about custody, I mean, we start with security, right? And that is the foundation. That's like what actually matters, right? What level of security are we bringing for these funds, for these assets? And that requires a huge amount of investment in technology, operational side, frankly, the entire company. I mean, we have this one of our values there, productively paranoid, is all about instilling in each and every Krakenite this level of awareness around security. And I mean, you could see it across our client engagement team in just thousands of Krakenites, how present this concept is of security, and it really is everyone's role. So this is absolutely the first place to start with when we talk about custody and protecting funds. We have a huge investment there. Nick Percoco, our chief security officer, fantastic talent, built a great team. But it really goes beyond that. It's everyone throughout engineering and operations and all these other areas that play a significant role. That's the bedrock. That's the foundation. That's the most important piece. There are a number of these other pieces, whether it's, a regulatory license for custody, whether it's, this proof of reserve attestation, whether it's a security audit, like a SOC, SOC type 2 audit or something along those lines, which we've done many of these different pieces here. A lot of those pieces are more focused on like communicating to others, where things are at, as opposed to like the actual security itself, right? Just trying to, provide some level of transparency or, again, attestation that, that a lot of these things are in place. And so, yes, we're looking to do all of those. Like I said, but the proper launch of the custody business, a big part of that is, coming with a custody license. But, the underlying piece is right where you started, Ryan, and is definitely the most important.
All right, well, let's talk about maybe a little bit of the end game here. And I don't know if what you guys are thinking, or if you can comment on any of this. But Kraken, obviously, right now it's a private company, right? So it's owned by a set of individuals, and I don't even know what the structure looks like. What's the end game for Kraken? Has Kraken considered going public at some point in the future? Does it kind of continue as is for decades to come? Does it get acquired by someone else? Is it too early to even ask these questions? What's your take there, Dave?
Yeah. Classic question that they, tell me we just, can't say much on, and I know frustrates you guys as well. But yeah, I mean, look, all of these things are out there for us. We, Kraken is owned, to your, one of the questions you mentioned in there, part by founders, part by employees, part by investors. And that, that makes up the shareholder, the set of shareholders for Kraken today. I definitely think, it's a growth space, and, we'll want to continue to, build relationships with investors. We frankly have done probably less fundraising than many of our peers historically, and have been more kind of, built, frankly, just, built off of what we've been able to deliver from, investing back into the business. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that we'll continue to want to have as part of our business going forward. But yeah, nothing really specific to say on, public side of things.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for spending the time with Bankless today, and just like being open and introducing yourself to the crypto community. I know you're going to be an important figure in kind of the years ahead as one of the leading crypto exchanges for sure. And best of luck to Kraken. Seriously, I'm glad that Kraken is taking a stand against the SEC and has decided not to exit the US, but to stand and fight. And I think many Bankless listeners are right here with you in that fight, and we appreciate you doing it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. Great talking with you.
The last question for you, Dave. What's Jesse up to these days? Jesse Powell.
Well, he's chairman of the board for Kraken, so he stays involved from that lens, decent amount, of course, at the board meetings and so forth. So
he gets to do more of the fun stuff, huh?
Yeah. He gets to keep it spicy on Twitter. Yeah. In a good way, in a way I like.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dave. This has been a pleasure. Action items for you, Bankless Nation. Will include a link to something that Dave talked about during the conversation. Why Kraken? With the mission and values of Kraken. It's a fantastic read, and there's a link in the show notes. Got to end with this. Of course, crypto is risky. You could lose what you put in, but we are headed west. This is the frontier. It's not for everyone, but we're glad you're with us on the Bankless journey. Thanks a lot.